Man, I can't wait for Enes Kanter to join the WNBA and show the world why women's sports is a joke.
I thought your biggest fear was men going into women's sports. Isn't that the biggest thing you guys are afraid of? But now you want him to go and dominate women?
What?
Don't say what. You know what I'm talking about. You guys have had this fake hysteria about men joining women's sports. Do you hate women more or trans people?
Can I just fucking hate both? Also, you're misgendering Enes. He doesn't identify as a man anymore. He identifies as a woman, libtard.
Okay, so now you believe in pronouns when it suits your narrative? You believe in gender pronouns.
Ow.
What? What's wrong?
You're making me critically think, and now the neurons in my brain are vomiting.
And today's musing is on subtext. It's also about sort of the death of any feigned altruism that used to exist, which my musing on Ta-Nehisi Coates touched on a little bit without actually using that word. Here's what I want to say. So we're back to the WNBA. I've been talking about the WNBA a lot, and there's a reason for that. The WNBA is, right now, it seems to be the crown jewel of national sports in the United States. It's sort of cresting in popularity and relevance and also in economic valuation. So there are teams that are valued at over $1 billion. I know that the Golden State Valkyries is the first team to achieve that. I'm going to confirm those numbers. And if you disagree with them, go talk to Fortune magazine or The Economist or whatever shareholder value propaganda magazine came up with that ranking. So in any case, the WNBA is the talk of the town. She is like the hot new girl in the villa, even though she's been around for decades. She is now that girl. And I've been hearing a lot of chitter chatter about what's happening in the WNBA and all of the changes that have come about because the new audience that has come with the new interest in the WNBA is not like the old audience. It was a very niche thing. It was known as being very family friendly and also very queer friendly at the same time. But something that I don't hear people talk about when it comes to why the WNBA is so popular is about the physical prowess and the power of women displaying their power, not just as aesthetic objects, but as agents of force or power or energy. They're using their body in service of something that is external to just the way they look. And in 2026, in our modern society, the majority of the time when we see women uplifted in our society, it's because of their value as an aesthetic object or for their aesthetics, good or bad, and what it garners them. That attention, the interest, the capital, the influence, because they have a very high aesthetic value or worth that's been assigned to them by whomever, right? And so we can think from models to entertainers, actresses, obviously influencers, the old-fashioned kind, musicians, go down the list, right? And that's not to say that there aren't WNBA players who are not models or who are not valued because of their aesthetic value or not seen as aesthetic objects. That's certainly not the case. However, their power, it resides in her body, in her ability to use her body, the movement of her body and the motion of her body. You know, it's a motion party, right? She's on the court. She's running back and forth 30, 40 minutes. She's sweating, using her body in a physical way. The WNBA is very physical, which I actually didn't know until I began to watch the league in earnest. But there's so many injuries. And not just ACL injuries or broken ankles or fingers or whatever, people's teeth getting knocked out by accident, but just them throwing their bodies onto the ground because of a layup or because of a collision. So it's high pressure, it's fast paced, it's really intense. And most of us can't do that. Most of us can't run back and forth for 30, 40 minutes, bouncing a basketball, guarding someone, trying to defend, score a point, do a free throw, whatever. I'm sure some of us can do it. Most of us can't. You know, most of us were not D1 collegiate athletes who have been prized for our ability to use our body in an agentic and very powerful way. The prowess. There's just this level of acuity and investment in the body as an object of power that I think is really attractive to a lot of people because we know that the time, the effort, the sweat, the tears, the sweat equity that it takes to become something like that. And most of us don't have the time or the interest or the desire to discipline the body in the way that professional athletes do. And so I think there's something about that also makes the WNBA so scintillating. It's this combination of women, physical beauty, aesthetic beauty, but also aesthetic power and aesthetic prowess that is pretty unusual, especially today when it seems like an extremely frail, weak, and emaciated beauty is not only upheld, but also fiercely protected. There is not a single person who's getting defended more about the frailty of her body than an emaciated pop star. That's really fascinating. So I wanted to start with that. It's an important piece that is often overlooked. And so over the past few days, we've heard all these stories that are undercutting that power and the importance of women who are in this league, who lead this league and continue to break barriers and break new ground with their abilities. We've heard story after story after story about Sophie Cunningham and these people who purport to want to quote unquote protect girls from men, or so they say. They say that there's this danger in allowing trans people in sports because it will be men who are hurting girls. That's the language that they use. And even that phrasing is about subtext. Many people have pointed this out because if you're a girl at the high school level and you have a trans girl who wants to join that basketball team, if you want to deny the identity of someone who is a trans person, that's still not an adult. Those are all people who are peers together. Trans identity, in my opinion, is authentic. It is a legitimate identity, but the people who want you to think there's a danger in it continuously rely on this subtext that there's a danger of men harming women. So they use this sleight of hand to conceal the truth. And the age and the power differential is something that they're pretending, they're using that, this thinly veiled deception to create a mythos about a man preying on girls. So even that in itself, it's subtextual. Moving on further into the conversation around Sophie Cunningham and a lot of right-wing conservatives and people who hate trans people and hate queer people writ large. There's been a lot of proselytizing about the dangers of trans people, which we cannot separate from the Trump administration's outright goal, express goal, to eliminate trans people, to eliminate them legally, socially, and materially. They want them gone from public life. And therefore, they have to rely on these myths, things that are not happening, to make people feel afraid and fearful of what could happen if we were to release gender essentialism, which has so many of us in a chokehold. That's been happening very publicly in the WNBA over the past few weeks. And so now, just over the past few days, the news story is the number of cis men, so-called cis heterosexual men, who have decided to foray into this because they want their own attention and they want their, as they say, they want their own clout. And they're offering their contribution to this conversation is that they want to be drafted into the WNBA. So I know one of the people, his name is Enes Kanter. He's like a failed conservative commentator. He was in the NBA for a couple of minutes. Literally, I believe he's played a couple of minutes and has failed at that level. And so he's decided his new raison d'etre is, well, anyone, if you're saying trans people should be able to play in the WNBA, I want to play in this women's league. And to be honest, I believe a lot of it is disinformation and misinformation bots. I think they're used a lot more than people think they are. But if you go to any comment section, it used to be Caitlin Clark is better than this player and people hate her because she's white. So the new thing, the new comment in every thread and TikTok and Instagram post about someone else succeeding in their field as a professional women's basketball player is Enes Kanter would be better at this, or Enes Kanter should be allowed in this league. So now Enes Kanter has summoned an army of trolls who are stating that we need to pay attention to him. They want to control the conversation and make a women's sports about some dude who was unable to compete with his peers. They keep saying that they want to protect women and girls from men, but for some reason, every single mainstream media news outlet has decided that they want to turn their attention to a man who wants to join a women's league. And so you have to ask yourself, what is the subtext to this false claim, this fictive claim? And the answer, of course, is it's a desire to control. I have to go back to my original statement about the power and the athletic prowess of these women playing this professional sport, because the conversation was about Olivia Miles and Sydney Taylor and the USA FIBA team that's going to be competing in a couple of weeks, and the playoffs, and Asia Wilson, and the MVP race, and the Rookie of the Year race, and all these things. But now we're talking about failed, unskilled, untalented men who want to take the attention away from these women. So the subtext of that is there's an intrinsic dominion or dominance that men should have over women's sports. It doesn't matter the domain. It doesn't matter if this is a women's space, has been created, cultivated, defended, protected, pushed forward by women. If a man wants to be a part of the space, he should have that right. And I can only attribute that to the level of attention that Enes Kanter has gotten from so-called legitimate sports and news platforms, the executives who have continued to play into this once again, because the most important thing to them is likes and clicks and controversy. And I believe that's also because the WNBA is seen as, and it is, I mean, it really is, it's a majority Black league, and there's a good number of folks in the league who identify as queer. Therefore, it is seen as uniquely vulnerable and worthy to be targeted by outside actors who wish nothing but harm to it and the players in it, because that league threatens what is happening right now in the United States, which is this resurgence of white male supremacy. Because again, masks are off. Things that people said in the past, they're being congratulated for. They're getting promotions for. They're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in GoFundMes for doing and saying. When you erase the social contract, or you erase a level of decorum or basic decency, what comes to the fore is a race to the bottom of cruelty. How cruel and nasty and mean and rude can you be? That is the person that they want to put into power. The tweet that I saw was from a lovely woman. I'm sure she's a great mother. I'm sure she's Christian. I'm sure she's a wife. Her name is Gina Milan. She said, "I can't wait for men to join the NBA so they can put these ghetto bitches in their place." Yikes. Ghetto bitches. So that's where we are, right? The subtext is the super text. It's the hypertext. I see the WNBA as a space that is Black women. Black women are scary. They're violent. They need to be controlled. And I want men to harm them. I want men to physically dominate or subjugate them. And that is what a lot of this so-called controversy is really about. It is located within a deep fear, a racial anxiety, a gender anxiety about who controls the narrative and who is seen as valuable and important within a specific context. And in the context of the WNBA, white women are not seen as the most important or valuable or worthy. They have to share that space with lesbians, with dark-skinned Black women, with light-skinned Black women, with women who are Black, period. And that is extremely uncomfortable to a lot of people. I believe it's a backlash against the progress of the league is going to get worse. Of course, that can reverse course or change. It will shift. But right now, we're peaking in the prominence and importance and the exaltation of these women, especially women like Asia Wilson, who is peerless in her league. Right now, there's a strong push for this pendulum to swing back the other way, where people think it belongs, which is the dominance and the supremacy of people who are seen as classically and intrinsically important and powerful. They don't care that Black women were the ones who pushed to create livable, dignified wages. So I just saw an alert that the Lakers are going to be purchased by far right-wing conservatives. That's the Lakers, okay? That sort of acquisition is something that's going to continue to happen within the league, within the women's league, because billionaires and the super rich understand that owning spaces of culture is how you shift or control the narrative about culture. That's why, Elon Musk bought Twitter, because he wanted to be able to make it a place where Nazis and white supremacists and hateful, abusive people have free reign, and they do, right? What he really succeeded in doing is making Twitter lose all of its credibility. That's going to continue to happen across industries because billionaires recognize the power in being able to control the text, the overt messages, as well as the subtext, the covert messages.